Hey everyone, this is Pete and welcome to the Q&A session for January 2021. I know it's technically February by the time I post this, but I'm recording it on the last day of January, so it totally counts. Before we get into the questions for this month, I just want to share a piece of news that is quite exciting, that if you're not a regular reader of Moe Gamer or if you don't follow me on Twitter or whatever, you might not be aware of. And that is the fact that alongside these projects that I've been doing for fun for years now, I now have a day job writing about video games over at ricedigital.co.uk. So do please follow me over there. Take a look at what we've been up to over there. We're building that site into a great place to hang out for fans of Asian video games, popular entertainment and all that sort of thing. So I hope you enjoy what's going on over there. I've got a few other interesting projects for the day job coming up soon as well, so watch out for those. If you follow me on Twitter at Moe Gamer, you'll find out more about those when they happen. Right, so into the questions. Don't forget, if you support me on Patreon at the S rank, which is about £5 a month, then you get the opportunity to submit your own questions each month, and then I will answer them to the best of my ability, according to what they are. So we got a nice selection this month. Took a bit of badgering people, but we got there in the end. So let's jump straight in with the first one, which is from Luke. And Luke is someone who I used to work with a frighteningly long time ago now, back when we used to work together at the Apple store here in Southampton. So it was great to hear from Luke again. It was great to see him sign up for Patreon and submit some questions as well. So, hi Luke, how you doing? Right, Luke's question. Wobbling my camera around. Luke's question. Hi Pete, here is my question. In recent years, I found that my backlog of games is getting longer and longer. You and me both, brother. There are so many great games to play and so little time, even with lockdown. Are you suffering from the same problem? Do you have any advice for finishing games I've started but never finished? And finally, what game from your backlog are you worried you will never finish? For me, it's Shenmue 3. I was such a massive fan of the original games and backed the Kickstarter, but mediocre reviews and with so many other games to play, I know I'll never even load it up. Take care and keep up the good work. Okay, there's a few questions in there, so let's take them one at a time. So the first one is, am I suffering from the backlog problem? And the answer is, yeah. Yes, I am. The trouble is that as someone who enjoys collecting video games, with the stuff that I'm into, with the sort of niche interest Japanese things, they often tend to have quite a limited print run. And so if you want a copy on your shelf, you need to pick it up as soon as you can. So sort of probably the most recent example of that is Atelier Ryza. Now the first Atelier Ryza ended up being a runaway success, but physical copies of that became quite difficult to find quite quickly. So if you didn't jump in there like when it first came out, even if you had no intention of playing it right away, then you would have found it quite hard to get hold of a copy of it. So the approach I tend to take is I will buy something that I know I'm going to play at some point. It might not be immediately, it might not even be for a few years, but I buy stuff that I know I'm going to play. And that way the backlog doesn't feel so bad, because I know it's made up of stuff that is going to keep me entertained in the years to come, regardless of what console it's on, regardless of what type of game it is. It's going to keep me busy, so I don't feel too bad about that side of things. As for the second question, do you have any advice for finishing games I've started but never finished? I tend not to suffer too much from that problem. It's a problem I used to suffer from a great deal, sort of particularly when I was back at university and so on. I would buy games that my friends were interested in, or that were big news at the time or whatever, but then something new would come out and then I want to buy that and play that straight away so it would be relevant or whatever. And I think the thing that's changed about what I do at the moment mostly ties in with what I do on things like YouTube and Moe Gamer, which is that I make a deliberate effort to focus on something now. If I know that there's something I want to play, I let that be the focus of my attention for the majority of my gaming time. So for the last year or so by this point, I've been focusing on the Atelier games. So the main game I play at any one point is an Atelier game. I might play some other stuff on the side for one reason or another, but the main focus of my gaming time, if I sit down and I think, right, I want to play some games, I want to take this seriously, I want to have a good time, I will boot up the Atelier game that I'm on. So it's just a case of, I guess, self-discipline, I'd call it. it sounds like a strange thing to say when you're talking about entertainment, but the same's kind of true with anything. So if you are a fan of books, it's, I imagine, just as easy to start one book, see something else that you think looks cool, start that one, start hundreds of them, and then never get anywhere in any of them. It's exactly the same sort of thing, really. So it's just a case of making a deliberate effort to focus your time and choose what you want to spend your time with. And also, I think, not being afraid to spend a bit of time with something and say, no, this isn't for me. I'm going to put this aside and maybe come back to it at some point in the future, but not feeling any guilt when you do that. Not feeling obliged to make it all the way through something. If something isn't resonating with you, then something isn't resonating with you, and there's nothing you can really do about that. And sometimes that's to do with the time that you explore that thing, and sometimes it's just to do with your personal reaction to it. So try and figure out the reason that you're not sort of fully engaged with the thing that you've tried to focus on, and if it's just not for you, don't feel too bad, just move on to something else. Continuing to Luke's third question, what game from your backlog are you worried you will never finish? Tricky one, that one, actually, because as I say, when I start something up, I do it with the intention of seeing it through to conclusion. So I will start playing something with the intention of playing it all the way through and then writing about it or making a video about it or something like that. So I tend not to suffer too much from that problem. I guess my twist on that question would be stuff that's in my backlog that I'm worried I will never start. And I think in my case, Unlimited Saga is a good example of that, because that's a game that I find absolutely fascinating. But for one reason or another, I just haven't got around to spending time with that yet. There's always been something that feels a little bit more pressing, or something that feels like I want to spend a bit more time with. And I know that's quite a big game. It's quite a challenging game to get involved with as well. It is something I want to cover, but at this point, I don't know when that's going to happen. I've sort of said several times, I think on 2 previous years, I've said, this is the year I tackle Unlimited Saga, and it hasn't quite happened yet, but it will do. It will do. But I've got those Atelier games to finish first. So there we go. All right. Next up, we have a question from Flame Chocobo. If you've ever played a game at the arcade, which arcade games have you played? For me, I've played games like Sunset Riders, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time, Metal Slug, Donkey Kong, and so on. I've talked a bit about this on some of my videos before, but arcades here in the UK are a lot rarer than they are or were in the US. And so arcade culture here was not really a thing. That said, we did have arcades, but you had to go to the seaside for them. You had to go to a seaside town, and that's where you'd find the arcades in this country. So anytime me and my parents would go on holiday to the seaside when I was a kid, I would make a point of asking them to take me to the arcade, because that was my only opportunity to play stuff like Outrun, G-Lock, Afterburner, Star Wars, that sort of thing. So probably the most memorable stuff that I've played, well, there's those ones I've just mentioned, really. So G-Lock for many years was and is one of my favourite arcade games. I was so happy to see the Sega Ages release of this on Nintendo Switch a little while back. So yeah, we used to go quite regularly to a seaside town in Cornwall called Padstow. Is it Cornwall or Devon? It's near the border anyway. Yeah, a little seaside town called Padstow, and we used to stay there quite frequently. And as part of our trips there, we would go to a larger seaside town called Newquay, which is most famous for its surfing, but I found it most exciting because of its arcade. And they had G-Lock there. They had the G-Lock sit-down cabinet, which tilted from side to side and up and down and back and forth and that sort of thing. And so every time I went there, I would spend £1 or £2 on that. £1 would get you, I think, 3 credits at the time for that. So I would play that. Connected with that as well, one time I made a specific effort to go to the Trocadero Centre in London, in Piccadilly Circus, which at the time I went had a huge Sega World there, which was a massive, massive arcade. And that's where you'd find all of the sort of really special high-spec arcade machines that you wouldn't find in your sort of standard Commodore Garden Seaside arcade, or in America just like your standard arcade. So they had stuff like the Ridge Racer arcade machine where you sat in a full-size car and you played on like a big cinema screen, and there were fans blowing in your face, and the dials on the instrument panel in the car you were sitting in actually worked, and that sort of thing. But the highlight of that for me was the version of G-Lock called R360, which is like a big spherical cabinet that you sit in, and you put down the shoulder straps like you're going on a roller coaster, and the whole thing rotates through 360 degrees in every direction. That was like its big gimmick. That's why it was called R360. And it was £3 for 2 minutes. But while you were playing that, there was like a one-to-one relationship between what was going on screen and what the cabinet was doing. So if you went upside down in the game, you go upside down in the cabinet, and it was an amazing experience. I was terrified of the prospect at the time, but I came out of it sort of really happy I'd had that experience. It was really great, really great. So that's something that I think there's like generations of gamers just aren't going to be able to experience that now, which is a real shame. I imagine there's some people out there who have picked up our 360 cabinets and are preserving them or refurbishing them and that sort of thing, but I couldn't tell you where they are these days. So that's a real shame that people will have to miss out on that sort of experience now. Okay, next question we got is from Misty. Misty says, "Hey Pete, I've been reading your coverage on the Atelier Dusk trilogy and realised that Twilight might just be my favourite combination of visual flair and atmosphere in games. I always end up adoring locations like that, from the Twilight Town in Kingdom Hearts 2 and Old Noir in Gravity Rush to that one city street with food stalls in 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim. Is there any kind of setting like that, time of day, weather, etc. you particularly enjoy seeing in games?" Yeah, I quite like Twilight too. I particularly like sunsets. Sunsets specifically. So like if you'll notice if I take screenshots of a game that has sort of day-night cycles, you'll probably see a lot of sunsets in there as well, because it's just an aesthetic that I really like. As far as sort of weather conditions go, I like the rain. I find the sound of rain very relaxing, and that's something I've been very conscious of since probably Ocarina of Time on the N64. There's a sequence in Ocarina of Time, I think it's in like the graveyard in Kakariko Village or something like that, where you walk over a particular boundary and it starts raining. And I would go back there just to listen to the sound of the rain and look at the rain effect on the screen, because it was just something that I really liked for some reason. It was hard to sort of pin down why I felt that way when I first experienced it, but it's definitely something I've always been interested in. So if you combine like rain with bright lights as well, so if you have sort of your stereotypical neon cyberpunk type look with rainy streets with neon signs in sort of bright pinks and turquoises and that sort of thing, that's probably one of my ideal settings. It's sort of a rainy future dystopia, I guess you call it. It sounds strange to say that a dystopia would be your ideal setting, but yeah, the sort of rainy nighttime look of things like Blade Runner and that sort of thing. That's something that I always really enjoy engaging with. A good example of that relatively recently, I think, was in Shadow Warrior 2. There's some levels that are sort of in a big futuristic city in there, and they really nail that kind of aesthetic that I really like. So yeah, sunsets and rainy night times. Next up, we got another question from Flame Chocobo. So another question, and getting close to the release of Ghosts and Goblins Resurrection. What game of the Ghosts and Goblins franchise is your favourite? For me, I'd stick with Ghouls and Ghosts for the Sega Genesis, as I did enjoy playing through that game, followed by Super Ghouls and Ghosts for the Super NES. Gotta confess, it's not a series I love. I don't hate it or anything, but it's not a series that I spent a ton of time with. Primarily because I'm not very good at it. I remember a while back, I was doing an extra live stream, and I spent some time trying to play Super Ghouls and Ghosts for a little while on that, and I just couldn't get anywhere. I could barely get halfway through the first level. So it's one of those series that I sort of respect, but I don't spend a lot of time with on a regular basis. That said, I think the installment in the series that I do have the fondest memory of would be Ghouls and Ghosts on the Atari ST, which I've covered on the Atari A to Z series. Simply because I've got some nice memories attached to that. For those who haven't watched that episode or ones from around that area, I talked a little bit about, at the time, my family and we would frequently go and see some family friends, and the family friends happened to be my brother's girlfriend's mother and father. And my brother's girlfriend's father was also my clarinet teacher, so there was a connection there as well. So we knew them pretty well. And we'd go over there and we'd have dinner and that sort of thing. And since I was quite young at the time, and sort of they didn't want me to just sort of sit around getting bored while all the grown-ups did their talking about things that didn't interest me, they would let me go and play on this gentleman's Atari ST. And he had an Atari 1040 ST-FM, I think, which was running a different version of the ST operating system to what we had at home. So that meant it ran certain games that we couldn't get working on our ST. And one of those was Ghouls and Ghosts. And I just remember playing Ghouls and Ghosts on his Atari ST and having such a great time with it. That we never actually owned our own copy of it. I've got a copy of Ghosts and Goblins behind me that you might be able to see just sort of about there. But no, we never owned a copy of Ghouls and Ghosts. And for me, that version was better than the Ghosts and Goblins port we got behind me. So that's probably my favourite one if I had to pick one. But like I say, it's not a series I know particularly well, so I have to correct that at some point. Next up, we've got a question from M68Ken. I know you're generally not a big fan of the current stylistic focus of many, especially AAA games. So with a new hardware generation on the horizon, how would you have preferred the 9th generation hardware platforms, currently PS5 and Series X, to focus their approach and influence to new games? Basically, be a more powerful Nintendo Switch. That's it. That's all I need. What the Switch is doing at the moment is absolutely perfect for me, because it's providing a good balance of niche interests, Japanese stuff that I love. All of the great indies are coming there. You can play in handheld, you can play on the TV. The only thing for me that is not quite there for Nintendo Switch, and it's not something I care about hugely, but I know it's something that other people care about, is the power is lagging behind a little bit. So it would be nice to have some of those games on Nintendo Switch being able to run at 60 frames a second and just look a bit nicer and be slightly higher resolution, have slightly less jagged edges and that sort of thing. Those are nitpicks. I don't care about them. Other people do. That's why I mentioned them. So if there was going to be a next generation console that I would jump on straight away, it would be a new Switch. That's it. That's all I need. As for PS5, I've got very little interest in that at the moment. When companies like Compile Heart and Nipponichi Software start supporting it, that's when I'll take an interest. I may well pick up a PS5 for Neptunia Reverse. I know it's the first Neptunia game again. But I'd be interested to see that. And if they look like they're going to be continuing to support the PS5 after that, then yeah, I'll go for it. But I need a bit more of an indication that there's going to be games that will appeal to me on there. Because at the moment, the vast majority of the experiences on PS5 seem to be highlighting exactly those sort of stylistic aspects that you mentioned that I'm not interested in. I don't care about photorealism. I don't care about high frame rates, HDR, 4K, that sort of thing. I mean, I've got a 4K TV downstairs, never used the 4K because it fucks up the interface and everything on Windows, and I don't have any consoles that support it. So yeah, whatever. And yeah, with all that comes a focus on realism rather than being stylized. And you don't need a lot of power to be super stylized. I mean, Persona 5, which is probably one of the most stylish games in recent memory, was basically a PS3 game. Yes, its most famous incarnation was on PS4, but it's a PS3 game. I mean, there was literally a version for PS3. That's probably quite a collector's item these days, but that's beside the point. Yeah, so all I need from a next generation consoles is just some sort of assurance that I'm going to continue to get the games that I enjoy. That's all I need, really. Pretty simple. Okay, and then finally, we've got a question from Mage Vita. Mage Vita asks, if they did another Neptunia spin-off game in a new genre, which genre would you like to see it done in? I've talked about this previously. I don't think I've done it on video, but I've certainly written about this before. And I think one thing I would really like to see is a combination of roguelike and the sort of action Neptunia combat. So, and I would like to see it fronted by IF. So I would like it to be like IF's Infinite Dungeon or something like that. So I would want the action combat of the Action Neptunia series, but then I would want randomly generated dungeons, sort of a huge variety of different challenges and that sort of thing. Throw in some elements from the mystery dungeon series in there, like traps and treasure and mapping out and bosses and that sort of thing. That would be great. I'd love that. That's the main one I've sort of been hankering for over these years, but I don't know if that's ever going to happen. I would suspect it would be reasonably likely we'd get some sort of Neptunia mystery dungeon game at some point. Simply because they've done the chibi character models thing before with Hyper Devotion Noir, and that worked really well. So I can see that happening. And Compile Heart have done mystery dungeon games before. They've done Sorcery Saga, Curse of the Great Curry God, which was a really good one. So I would be surprised if we don't see a Neptunia take on that at some point. But I would particularly like to see it with the full-size characters and with the action combat of stuff like Neptunia U and Cyber Dimension Neptunia and that sort of thing. Because I think that would be a really nice combination of things. I would also, as a side note, I would also love to see a Senran Kagura game like that as well. I love Senran Kagura's combat, and I love the parts where you do get to run through levels, but I sometimes find myself feeling like I would love to run through a bit more of a level in a Senran Kagura game. And the focus in Senran Kagura is always very much on the fighting encounters, which is why the levels themselves aren't very long. But then I also can't help but feel that this would be super fun if there was also like a dungeon to explore, and like you went into a room and then you had an enemy encounter and that sort of thing. That would be great. So yeah, I guess that's my answer to that. Right, that is all the questions that we've had for this month. So hopefully those are all satisfactory answers for all of you. If you do want to get involved with the next month's Q&A session, you sign up at patreon.com/Pete Davison and sign up at the S rank, which is a £5 a month. And for that, you get monthly wallpapers and also the opportunity to submit your questions. You can also support at the A rank, which is £1 a month. And that gets you daily blog posts for you to enjoy as well, or hopefully enjoy anyway. So it just remains for me to say, as always, thank you very much for all of your support in this month and the previous months and throughout all of 2020 as well. And I'll see you again next time.